We will start here on the encounter form. The encounter form is a summary of the diagnoses and charges for a specific patient encounter. We'll zoom in to view the entire encounter form. Now let's take a moment to review the information on the encounter form. The top section includes information about this encounter. This section includes the name of the provider for which the appointment was scheduled, the billing provider, performing provider, and the referring provider. To the right of the provider section, we see the billing information for this encounter. The billing information includes the billing division, billing area, location of the appointment, and the patient's insurance if applicable. All fields in the provider and billing sections are automatically populated. However, if any field must be changed, we can do so by using the drop-down arrows to the right of each field or by using the All buttons to do a search for the appropriate provider. The next section is a list of diagnoses for this encounter. The diagnoses are automatically transferred to the encounter form from the assessment section of the note. Even though the diagnoses are automatically populated, a diagnosis can be removed. For example, let's remove the diabetes diagnosis. First, we must select the diabetes diagnosis from the list by highlighting that line. With the diabetes diagnosis selected, the Remove DX button becomes active. To complete removing the diabetes diagnoses, we must simply click on the Remove DX button. The diabetes diagnosis has been removed from the diagnosis section. In addition to removing a diagnosis, we can add a diagnosis. We'll review the process of adding an additional diagnosis later in this lesson. The next section is a list of procedure charges for this encounter. The procedures are automatically transferred to the encounter form from the Procedures section of the note. Similar to the Diagnosis section, additional procedures can be added or removed in the charge module. We will demonstrate this process later in this lesson. Notice the rest of the buttons at the bottom of the encounter form. From here, we can choose to see the charge details, create a new task, print a copy of the charge, or submit the charges. Notice the Submit button is currently not available. In order to submit the encounter form, we must first review and add charges. We have completed our review of the encounter form. We'll move on to the Diagnosis tab by selecting the tab from the horizontal toolbar. We are now on the Diagnosis tab. Here we can review our diagnoses again. We can choose to remove a diagnosis by selecting it in the list, then clicking the Remove button. We can also add additional diagnoses by using the Diagnosis selector at the top. For our example, let's add the diabetes diagnosis we removed earlier. The first step is to select the view we want to use when searching. This is done by selecting the drop-down arrow to the right of the View field. The list of values for the View field displays. From this list, there are 4 views from which to choose. Selecting My Favorites displays a list of diagnoses you have previously marked as a favorite. The Master View allows you to search all diagnoses. The Patient Past Diagnoses displays only diagnoses the current patient has previously had. If a provider has logged into AEHR as a specialty provider, another option displays a specialty. This option allows the provider to search diagnoses specific to their specialty. Since our example is not for a specialty provider, the specialty option does not display. Let's select the Master View from the list of values. Now let's enter our search criteria in the search field. In searching for a diagnosis, we can enter an ICD-9 code, ICD-10 code, or a full or partial name of the diagnosis. For our example, we will enter DMII. Once the search criteria has been entered, the Go button is used to begin the search. The Diagnosis Search dialog box displays. The next step is to locate the appropriate diagnosis from the list of results. Once the diagnosis is located, a single click is used to select the option. When a diagnosis is selected, a green check mark appears to the left of the diagnosis name and the diagnosis displays in the column on the right. To add additional diagnoses, you would simply enter search criteria into the search field and click the binocular icon. In our example, we will proceed with the diabetes diagnosis selected. To continue, we could click on the Next button, which would move us forward to the Visit Charges tab. In our example, we'll click on the OK button to return to the Diagnosis tab. We have returned to the Diagnosis tab. The diabetes diagnosis is now listed in the Diagnosis selector at the top of the screen. To add this diagnosis to our favorites list, we would click the Favorites button. The primary column in the Diagnosis section indicates which diagnosis is the primary diagnosis for this charge. Let's review the process to change the primary diagnosis for David. In this example, we will make the diabetes diagnosis the primary diagnosis. To do this, we must first select the diagnosis. With the diagnosis selected, the Set Primary DX button becomes active. Selecting this button switches the primary diagnosis. The diabetes diagnosis is now the primary diagnosis for this charge. We will now continue to the Visit Charges tab by selecting the Next button. Here on the Visit Charges tab, we will conduct a search for the visit charge. The visit charge search is similar to the search we conducted for the diabetes diagnosis on the Diagnosis tab. The first step is to select the appropriate view from the list of values in the View field. To display the list of views, we'll click on the drop-down arrow to the right of the View field. The View field list of values now displays. For our example, we'll select the Master View option. The search field is completed with the search criteria. We can search by visit name or code. In our example, we'll search by the name Office Visit, so this is entered in the search field. After entering in the search criteria, the Go button is used to initiate the search. The search results display. In our example, the office visit is a level 4 for an established patient. To select the appropriate visit charge, we single-click on the charge listed in the search results. The office visit now displays in the Visit Charge section. Notice the Linked DX column in the Visit Charge section. The charge we selected is automatically linked to both diagnoses as shown here. If the visit charge was only applicable to one diagnosis, we could unlink the diagnosis from the charge by unchecking the checkbox to the left of the diagnosis. We also have the ability to remove an incorrect visit charge by highlighting the charge and clicking the Remove button at the bottom of the screen. In our example, we have finished the visit charges. Let's move to the procedure charges by clicking the Next button. We are now on the Procedure Charges tab. Procedures entered for the encounter will automatically populate the Procedures tab once ordered or completed. For this lesson, we will manually add a procedure charge to illustrate the manual process. The steps to add procedure charges are similar to adding diagnoses and visit charges. First, we must set the view by selecting the drop-down arrow to the right of the View field. The list of values from the View field display. We'll select the Master View. The next step is to enter the search criteria. We can search by procedure code or by procedure name. In our example, we have given David an insulin injection, so we'll search using the procedure code. After entering the search criteria, the Go button is used to initiate the search. The search results now display. Next, we'll select the procedure from the results. The procedure charge is now listed in the Procedure Charge section. Since this procedure charge is not applicable to the strep throat, we will unlink the diagnosis from the procedure charge by clicking the checkbox to the left of the diagnosis. If we had given David 2 injections of insulin, we could add a second procedure by selecting it again from the search results. To demonstrate this, we'll select the procedure charge again. We now have 2 procedure charges for insulin. In our example, we'll say that instead of having 2 injections, David received 1 injection of 10 units. To account for this, we must remove the second charge. Since the charge is already highlighted, we can click the Remove button to remove this charge. The procedure charge has been removed. Now with the insulin charge highlighted, we'll click on the Charge Details button to indicate that David received 10 units. The Charge Details window displays. Next, we'll click on the tab titled Other. On the Other tab, we'll change the quantity from 1 to 2 in the Units field. The OK button is used to finalize the change and return to the procedure charges. We now have 2 units with 1 procedure charge. This completes the procedure charges. Let's proceed to the encounter form by clicking Next. Back on the encounter form, we need to do a final review of the diagnoses, visit charges, and procedure charges. Note the green face icons in the charge section. Green face icons indicate all required information is entered and the charges can be submitted. If the encounter form displays yellow faces, the charge failed the medical necessity checking, or the charge or linked diagnosis is inappropriate based on the patient's age or gender. Even with yellow faces, the charges can be submitted, but there are warnings. Lastly, a red face could display. The red face indicates there is information missing and the charge cannot be submitted until the missing information is provided. When a red face appears, a link displays that describes the information that is missing. We have completed our charge entry and it's time to submit the encounter form. Submitting the encounter form transfers it to the billing or coding department for review. Once the biller or coder reviews the encounter, it is submitted into PPMS. After the encounter is submitted to PPMS, the charges are locked and cannot be modified from AEHR. Let's submit these charges to the billing coding department by clicking on the Submit button. The Submit Encounter dialog box displays. This message indicates that the patient's record must contain documentation to support each charge being submitted. From here, we can click OK to submit the charge or cancel to return to the encounter form. Also notice we can prevent the Submit Encounter dialog box from displaying each time by checking the box Don't show this message in the future. For our example, we'll click OK to submit the charges. The charges have been submitted for review and we have returned to the daily schedule. Notice the green $sign that appears to the left of David's encounter. This indicates that the charges have been submitted. In our example, we entered the encounter form directly from the note. If time does not permit completing the charge review while in the note, you can access the encounter form by highlighting the encounter on the daily schedule, then clicking the Encounter Form tab on the horizontal toolbar. This concludes the demonstration for the charge module. You are now ready to proceed with the practice scenario.